Dit is een luchtfoto van ongeveer een jaar of 10 geleden, waarop de situatie te zien is van het museum zonder de afgrenzing aan de straat. Een merkwaardige onafheid heeft eigenlijk geen duidelijke definitie. En dat is eigenlijk ook het gevolg van hoe het museum hier is ontstaan. De fabriek ziet u daar rechts, dat is de bemonsmeerderij Thomas de Beer. Hier vooraan, deze locatie, ziet u ons auditorium waar we nu zitten. Dat was al een nieuw in 2001. En verder is het eigenlijk onaf gebied, zou je kunnen zeggen, met, en dat kunt u ook goed zien rechts van de ingang, het perkje wat het uitgangspunt vormde voor de tuin van Sophie Walker. I'm the one, I'm the culprit. Dit is de situatie die wij aantroffen toen we in 1989 hier een eerste blik kwamen werpen naar de situatie hier. De plek van die lantaarnpaal aan de gevel is de plek waar u tegenwoordig het museum binnenkomt. Daar zit de entree. En op dit voorterrein, wat nu heel mooi vorm heeft gekregen, stond van alles en nog wat half afgebrande fabrieksonderdelen, een bosje met maaibomenhout, berkjes en van alles en nog wat. Het was heel zielig dat daar een einde aan kwam, maar het komt bijna niet anders. En u ziet, het was nogal onbestemd. We hebben, zonder dat we daar erg in hadden, in het begin wel een soort van vorm ervoor gevonden, klimop tegen de gevel, want dan was het wat vriendelijker, omdat het museum toch wel een zekere dichte doos is, zou je kunnen zeggen, een oesterachtig karakter heeft. Die nieuwe entree zit hier en u ziet ook dat het voorterrein toen nog maar tot aan alleen onze gevel ging, want het pad dat nu langs de gevel loopt tot aan de Kuiperstraat, loopt hier alleen maar tot onze nooduitgang, want de rest was nog onontgonnen gebied. Now we'll continue. The municipality, the city of Tilburg, was of course very happy with our coming here, because a free museum, a museum that doesn't cost any subsidy, was of course a special gift to the community, one hoped, because we hadn't done anything yet. And the mayor of Tilburg at that time, in 1989 and 1990, was a very ambitious man. Tilburgers amongst you will remember him, Gerrit Broks. And he understood the possible importance of a museum of contemporary art in this city. And when we had chosen an architect to work with us on the building, which was not an obvious choice in the beginning, he immediately stepped in and said that he would like that architect help design a plan for the whole neighborhood, so that it wouldn't become, in Dutch, trespaarbouw. You have to remember that. I will ask you later on. Trespaarbouw, as you know, is very cheap social housing, which is very bland and characterless. So he asked our architect to make a city plan for this, which is the pink buildings represented here as simple things in this model. And you can see that our architect Mels Krauw already was thinking of a green area in the front, and also a building that would close off the street access, the entrance to the street. But everything was built, except for that little thing here in the front there. That's only came in a very different form later on. But the rest was all realized. When we were approaching our 20th anniversary, which was in 2012, this was still the situation of the area, the entrance area. A desert of brick, as you can call it. And brick is very typical for Holland, but it was not very becoming, very welcoming. So the new mayor of Tilburg came to us and said, we really appreciate what you have been doing over the years in Tilburg. We would like to offer a present. How about redoing the parking area and making an visible access to the street? And would the museum be interested if the architect would design that? Of course, we said yes. This was the plan, and you all know it now. It was still very open, but there was more green, but still a lot of brick. But the city side, street side became a lot nicer. And the question was asked to the architect, make something that keeps the open character, but also when you pass it, sort of gives the idea of a frontal area of housing. And then, before we knew it, this was offered for our 20th anniversary. It was finished by the time we were 23. City planning. Then the mayor, ambitious as mayors can be and generous, came to us with another proposal. He said to my chairman, also Pont and me, how about a sculpture to liven up that frontal area? And the city would have a generous amount of money available, which he then didn't have, but had to collect using various approaches. And of course he did not have a special thing in mind. I did. And I went to somebody that you know quite well, your then friend and now husband, Anish Kapoor, who I know for over 30 years, and I thought, well, this would be really, really amazing if I could ask him for such a project, but knowing that the budget we had wouldn't be enough. So I went there with a pretext. As a friend, I visited him, you know the story, asking him about his ideas for our 25th anniversary. What about if we do this? What do you think, Anish? Would this be a good thing to do? Sure, if you think, it's really fun. And then I said, and we also were offered by the city a generous budget, which is of course not enough for Anish Kapoor, but it's for a sculpture. Why is it not enough for Anish Kapoor? Was his immediate answer, which I hoped for, but could have only dreamt of. And so, right there at the table, Anish came, we went into the studio first, and then he brought back all these little models of other sculptures he was working on. You can see here, this is a straight up twisted cube, but it was already reminiscent a little bit of what was coming. And here you see 3D models that he immediately printed of what our sculpture could be. So this little red thing, if you put it up right, you have Sky Mirror already in principle. And as good sculptors nowadays, he was working with his arithmetic and on what it would do, how the sun would work and all that. And the next time I came, there was already a model, which reminded me also of 2001, A Space Odyssey, you know, black slap. But of course this was to be interpreted as a shiny thing in a different way. Anish came here, we looked at the site, we looked at that brick front of the building, and it was like this a little bit, with that sorry piece of grass, green in the back, and parking on the area, which of course a lot of people still want, but we don't do anymore. And yeah, where this picture was taken was originally also the idea to put the sculpture away from the green. But I thought it would be quite strange to have that sculpture sitting there with that sorry piece of green behind it. So I said to him, can't we think of something like, I know that Sophie is into plants. I don't know much about it yet. I thought if husband and wife, then I'm already set, and they fight it between them, then I'm all done. And this is how it started. And then he was very pleased with that idea. And you came. And there we start, because I looked into what Sophie had done. And one of the things that Sophie did was not only looking good, but also looking into a wonderful garden designed by you, which you did, I believe, for the 2014 Chelsea Flower Show, with which you immediately won a prize as a very young garden designer, which is rather different from your everyday garden design. Can you tell a little bit about this?
Well, yes. This was called Cave Pavilion, and I wanted to make a garden because Chelsea Flower Show is very traditional in the way they make projects. Things are very floral. You tend to have the same garden designers repeating over and over. And you tend to see the same plants. Now, I was a young woman, the youngest woman actually who's done Chelsea, and I thought, right, I want to make a garden with plants that no one's ever seen before. But that's quite difficult. So I contacted two plant hunters who I've been working with quite a lot, and I said, could you help me? I want to make a garden that's made only of plants that have been collected from seed in the wild. That means the oldest plant in there is probably 20 years old and it's not very big yet. So we started out with this project and we said, okay, what have people not seen in Chelsea before? It's all very well using a magnolia. We'd love to use a magnolia, but how do we find one that's really endangered or that's only just been recognised as a magnolia? So we started doing it. We've got these incredible array of plants. And I was determined to only include one flower in the whole garden, which of course is not what is done at Chelsea. So we included a new genus. A new genus is, so you've got the genus and then the species. So human is a genus and then being is the equivalent of the species. But there's a new genus in there. It's from the Hamamelis family, the witch hazel family. And it just has one tiny, tiny little flower that was about 3 meters back into the garden that you could only see if you looked really carefully and were pointed it out. But the great thing was that it really gave me the confidence to start working with things that I didn't know. And of course that demands an intuitive approach to plants and planting. So.
Yeah. When you look at this, of course, for anybody in the art world, you think that this is also a frame hung on a wall or set in space that you look into. Is that on purpose, of course, but was that a reference as well?
Yeah. I mean, so at this point, I've just been to Japan for the sort of third time, and I was really interested in Japanese gardens. And I felt like Japanese gardens sort of present a challenge to you. You can't quite enter them fully. And of course, the dry Zen gardens can't actually be entered physically at all. So I thought, what does it mean to make a garden that's actually more similar to a sculpture or a painting, which can't be entered, but of course a painting hangs on the wall and it's there to be entered with your imagination. So what does this mean, that this garden's kind of really pushing you to engage with it rather than just walk on it like you would a lawn?
Yeah, well, those of you that do not know the Japanese garden, I'll give you a very special example that you sent as an inspiration for this garden. And I was rather taken aback, as you may be. This is a garden that you can partly enter, but not quite. As you may know, Japanese gardens are to be contemplated from a certain position, to look at, to empty your mind, or to fill it. And this was one of the examples, not the only one, that you sent. Now, Hendrik, if I want to think about a garden for Anish's sculpture, what about this? There I thought, now let them fight that out again, because how is Anish Kapoor?
We'll get the red and blue paint out for your 30th anniversary.
But fortunately, Sophie, you sent me one quieter one shortly after. The Japanese garden, you produced an incredible book about this recently, which is available. It's also a commercial undertaking, of course, available here in our bookstore. But you sent this to me to discuss the idea of a water garden, because that was one of the things that came up quickly. Why exactly this?
Okay, so both these two gardens, in fact, this one's very, very old, 14th century, I believe, but it is made by a painter, someone who's very accomplished in Japanese ink painting, which of course takes it from the Chinese landscape painting. And the one before is designed by a contemporary artist, a Japanese contemporary artist. And I'm really interested in the idea of the garden as a composition. So the starting point that Hendrik gave me, which was Anish's sculpture, obviously the entire garden then has to work to frame this sculpture in some way. And the sculpture itself, in Anish's case, is watery. It's a reflection, it's engaging, it's fluid, it doesn't stick to one particular image in any way. And that's, in a way, what these gardens, these Japanese gardens do. They move with time and weather and the seasons. And there's something really remarkable about it. So we felt that, you know, A, water is a way of protecting Anish's sculpture, but B, it really works in terms of framing it in a fluid way.
Yeah, well, that came up only as we went, because at first nobody, even Anish himself, nor I, was thinking of protecting the sculpture. Nobody just oversaw that, although inside we have a sculpture made of almost the same kind of material, which needs constant protection. So when we discussed the idea of maybe we should make sure that the sculpture sits away from the people, so that people don't touch it and damage it, because the human hand is the most powerful stain equipment available. The stain is flaccid.
It's also the most powerful way to affirm what you're looking at when you're looking at something that can't be pinpointed like that sculpture.
Yeah. So this was another example. And this was very important for our discussion, I remember.
Yeah.
because I really like the idea that you propose of this fluidity that you already mentioned. You mentioned the island as a possibility of a place for the Anish sculpture. I had a problem a bit with the material, because you said, no, all these stones can be glued or can be cemented in, and I, museum director, knowing our visitors, was afraid that people would pick it up anyway or wiggle it loose and throw it to see just if it was a mirror or not. Because still people don't believe it's steel, because the backside looks like that stuff that you find on old-fashioned mirrors, so they want to throw things at it and prove that it can break. So, not quite the good material. Now, this came really at a very good time, because you sent me some other supporting pictures, remember? And then you came to Tilburg, and I was able to show you, again, what our front area is made of, because for a while, I don't know if some of you have seen this, people saw this sinkhole in front of the museum. It was like the ground had washed away and then the whole street had collapsed. This was on purpose. This was done to do testing to see if the ground would support that heavy weight sculpture. And then you came and you said,
Then we thought, how can we make the undulation? And thanks to Dutch brickleg seals, it was possible, and we made what we called Mount Fuji, a very mini Mount Fuji.
But just to see, because you should know that these street bricks have never been used for sculptural things like this. They are just to put in the street and leave them there and let cars and trucks drive over it. So this is a totally different approach, but you were happy with it. And you worked with a very good team that I'm going to mention later. On the possibilities of creating something. But let's go back to inspiration again, because you also sent me wonderful other things, which are not Japanese, but are British.
Yeah. People always ask me, now that I've written this book on Japanese gardens, do I make Japanese gardens? And it's a really hard question to answer, because if I say yes, then people assume that they look Japanese. But actually, I do make Japanese gardens in a way, because I'm so interested in the tools that the Japanese garden maker uses. It's very divisive, the way they push the visitor through the garden. You know, they're very directive in the paths that they set down. This path, for instance, is a garden I made at Hampton Court Palace. You know, you can go to a certain point, reflect, and turn back. And this actually was the starting point for the garden here at Pont. And I'm not sure what happened at Pont, but everything went curvy. I think it was Anish's sculpture, because if you look at the geometry of the sculpture, it's all made up of straight lines, but they're packed on top of each other. And so because they're slightly different angles, they form this curve as they go up. And in this garden, we've done everything with bricks, which of course are the most linear of building materials, and yet we've got everything to go on a curve as well. So
I'll show them some of the things that you went with. This is how you started looking and drawing in England, or in the United Kingdom, I should better say. And it wasn't quite sure. You can see here, it wasn't quite sure how far it would extend. It would go way beyond the entrance at first, where the sculpture would go. These are all sketches. It's very nice, I always find, to look into the heart of an artist while drawing.
The little thing there.
Oh, sorry,
little tag that we made the sculpture out of.
Well, here, I have a picture of it right here.
There we go.
This is called imagination. But it works. But anyway, this is the same day that you came and we looked at that, where you were standing on that Mount Fuji, and together with Kees Remmers, who we first approached. Kees Remmers is our aannemer, who does everything here in the museum with this team when we need to build walls or whatever. And I thought, an aannemer, he must also know something about gardens. Well, Kees doesn't really know about gardens. He knows about mowing grass and keeping pigeons, but
a lot about bricks.
But yeah, a lot about bricks. So, but he was very supportive, and through Kees we came into contact with Bert van Helvoort, and they teamed up to make a temporary company that did this installation for you. And this is the first time where you pulled out the idea of that wedge that you showed before.
So
But here you wanted to make it curvy.
Yeah, well, I couldn't make up my mind whether it should be curvy, straight, how long, should it go towards the entrance, should it point towards the sculpture, etc. And then Case and I were struggling with this very long tape measure, and the wind was beating away, and suddenly the whole thing just blew and became a curve. So we thought, right, it'll be a horn-shaped path, which I think works really well because it's going down as well. It's sort of.
Did you think of that right away? That this had to be part of it?
Well, I kept seeing the horn in Anish's work, and he'd been making a lot of other crescents that were sort of like the moon, or horns that were like antlers, and so I had it in my mind somewhere, and then the wind helped make that decision.
Dutch wind.
Yeah, exactly.
I have something on the end at the end for you about it. So this we showed.
Ah, yes. So this was fun. It took ages.
Big model.
Big model. Yeah.
Did you do that all yourself with Federica? You're a good collaborator.
Exactly. We had a little bit of help. No, it was good fun making the model because then we could work out more or less what was going on, even though it was much more complicated at this point than what we ended up doing. And of course that was as if we kneaded it like a loaf of bread, kneading it down into the ground, which is originally what we planned, and then we decided actually to have a wall around it where visitors could sit at the same time.
Yeah.
Would probably work better.
That worked a lot better, but I'm just going to flip through these. You can see here that it goes beyond the entrance, as we discussed, and that sculpture was much closer to the public. It was a different garden, but basically the idea is already there, connecting ponds and rather big shrubs or trees.
Yeah.
And then
yes, and
we
then we got to
started getting close to the real result.
Yeah. Good. And then it was time to put the paths, and we thought, well, very narrow paths through the planting would be acceptable since there's so much other space to walk past the garden. And hopefully to make an intimate experience along the back. And then the question was how to plant it. I don't know what your next images are and whether they're...
Well, the next image is still very practical.
Yeah.
It's Kees and Bert van Helvoort laying out bricks in the dirt, in the sand, to test if this would be the right curve for the pond. The pond, but the pond.
Yeah.
The vijver. And we had to photograph this or FaceTime so that Sophie could see it, because she couldn't come here every day, of course, from London. And then by making these models in the sand, you slowly decided, and sometimes Anish got involved as well, this would be it.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, when I mentioned this was all done. We started, I believe, talking about a garden in March. We came here in April. We were building the garden starting end of July. The people, Bert van Helvoort and Kees Remmers, they didn't take their vacation. They worked all summer, and it was a very hot summer. You may have forgotten what it was. And it was finished on September 16th, which we will show as well, of course, but this is when we were building it. And here we can see already that at that point it was decided that you would use the brick rather than stones, rocks.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, I found that very interesting, thinking about how people would interact, not just by walking through the garden, but also by relaxing, by sitting. We were proposing initially big rocks.
Yes.
For them, fake ones or real ones. But here you went a different way.
Yeah, we decided to keep using this brick geometry because since we'd gone with bricks in the first place, and there are so few places in the world where you would actually work with bricks, and where you've got this sort of existing landscape, you've got a brick desert, which it was. And I mean, I hope this proves that bricks can be of real interest and real use. But we decided to keep playing with this geometry. We were having so much fun making these mini Mount Fujis and things. That we then thought, what happens if one's flat-topped and then could be made into a bench, and and carried on doing it. And then the horn on the way down could actually be sat on or walked upon, or that it was a friendly garden, almost more like a playground in a way than a garden. It's a place to really be around.
But it's difficult to foresee how the effect is on such a scale. I mean, that model in your studio was big, but of course it had nothing of the scale of this. It had to be technically feasible. So Van Helvoort and Remmers worked on making these ponds like these sort of things you use to make sidewalks, which I never would have thought of, but I'm not a garden expert. And it was amazing how effective everything was done.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was a remarkable Dutch ability to say, okay, now this is feasible, this isn't. We just sort of went with what was feasible and made it happen.
You've never worked in Korea as well, huh?
Yes.
How is it
Keith's
there?
just been there, yeah. It's much more difficult.
Yeah? They say yes all the time when they mean no?
Yes. I mean yes. I'm English. But yeah, I mean it was really interesting. And then of course the sculpture didn't arrive until the last moment, so
I have pictures of that as well, but
poor Hendrik.
First I want to talk about the garden, of course.
Yeah.
This is also a wonderful idea of how to make a brick pond watertight.
Yeah.
Because the bricks were put on top of this vijverfolie, and bricklaying with street bricks was not something that everybody could do. I've never done actually like this before, so we had to have real special people to do that. I think this is early August.
Yes.
16th of September.
Might be mid-August by now.
Maybe mid-August already. Like a month before it should be finished. And then of course the great moment that Federica and you started planting. And this I think is the first week of September.
Yeah, it was.
The end of the first week of September.
The week before.
A week and a half before the opening.
By the way, planting in August or September is a no-no horticulturally because all the plants are at the end of the season. So when Hendrik said it should look lovely, I thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to find anything looking lovely?
That's what you have to keep in mind too. This was done at a moment that you normally do not plant a garden, and it had to look like a real garden. Yes. And you didn't want to do the easy way in with yearlings, because that's what some other people, like famous Piet Oudolf, did in Museum Voorlinden. The first season planted 1 year plants, and then later on they started elaborating. Then we did the thing right away.
Yeah.
And was that very difficult? I mean,
very difficult. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of very, very young plants, especially as we were using these rare plants that have been collected from seed, like the ones I mentioned earlier. But we've got a lot of young plants there that will one day be beautiful, huge trees. But that'll be on the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
But this is the thing about gardens, they don't just happen. You can't just sort of lay something out and it'd be wonderful immediately. You've got to allow it to take the time to grow.
On your list of possible subjects, you also mentioned these plant hunters, Sue and Glenn Wynne-Jones.
Yeah.
I have a picture of them. This is not of course.
So things like this went into the ground, which of course, it's definitely not a cheap shot.
No, but you're very happy that you're able to put them in the ground, that's clear.
Yeah.
And the planting was done while the building of the garden itself was still going on as well. And you had an example, very close by.
Yes, the back garden. So the first time I came to Pont, it was winter, and there was absolutely nothing in the back garden. Only these sort of weeping quinces. I thought, God, how interesting, I wonder what's here. And then the next time I came, everything was just lush and so casual. And I thought, God, this is one of the best gardens I've ever seen. So I thought, God, I would never normally plant in the way that I've done it. But I wanted to emulate what had happened in the back. And ironically, Kazumi, the gardener, is Japanese, and he had this great feeling for the place.
Kazumi Makino, he's here as well, so if you look around later on, then you'll possibly find him. He's the one that maintains maintains this garden for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And quinces is what you mentioned. That's a word that we do not easily translate. Ja, die staan hier. Dat zijn kweetperen. Die staan in die tuin. Dat zijn zo'n vrij onbekende tuinplanten.
So this was definitely the inspiration. So to meet this very tight geometry of the bricks with something as casual and free flowing as this in the back. Yeah.
Well, here are your friends.
Yes.
Plant hunters. They look awesome.
They are awesome.
We had to tell you, because you have it here, you mentioned the ethics of plant hunting. We actually got people wrote us a mail that I'd like to come, and by the way, somebody was worried about plant hunters, that if that was ethically right, and as I said, well, it's not like hunters that go for dinosaurs or what do you call those things, rhinoceroses, and these people collect seeds and look at what they do with them and where, and of course not to destroy the local habitat, but to make sure that it lives on as long as possible. So maybe tell a little bit about them.
Interestingly and rather surprisingly, we only know and have catalogued 1/3 of the plants on Earth. So if you think about that in the context of the future of medicine, there's huge possibility. But you know, there is this recent controversy because a lot of mainly American pharmaceuticals have gone into places and just dug up whole plants and taken them. So people who are individual plant hunters tend to work by collecting seed. If you collect seed rather than, you know, cut a piece of vegetation, you're not making a genetic match identically, but you're protecting the gene pool. So it's really important for future diversity and things to collect by seed. But of course it's much more difficult because you have to, as a plant hunter, these two legends live in Wales. So they have to anticipate, we think that this particular valley in Vietnam might have a particular kind of Acer, say, that we think probably hasn't been catalogued before, or a whole new genus that hasn't been catalogued. And then you have to anticipate, when would that plant be in seed, and when would the seed then be ripe to collect? And if it's on the edge of a cliff and there's only a few of these trees, how are you going to get hold of that seed? So you've got to find devices and things to, or be very willing to climb, and have your clothes shredded, as Glenn told me when I was invited on a trip with him. He said, bring clothes you don't mind bringing home. God. But it's hard work, and you've got to be really intelligent, and once you've collected that seed, you then need to know how to germinate it. It's all very well being in possession of this collection, but what do you do with it? You have to really think about the environment that it's grown in naturally and how you can then emulate it. Now, some of the plants here, you know, might have taken 7 years before they've worked out how to germinate that seed. And then, of course, you know, you need to be very attentive to it and very intuitive towards it to grow it into a plant that can then produce seed, which then they can pass on to other people. So I think as an individual, if we were all to use rare plants and plants that have been grown from seed rather than cultivated in mass quantities in our gardens, it would be a way of protecting the future diversity.
And there's no danger that you bring something that will outgrow the local plants?
Well, so there are only a few people with licenses to actually take seed across borders. They hold the only license in the UK other than Edinburgh Botanic Gardens and Kew Botanic Gardens to actually bring seed into the UK without luggage being opened by customs, interestingly. Because of course if you have someone open it and do something wrong with that seed and not then germinate it in controlled environments, then you're risking. So they're incredibly conscientious about the way they do things, and they wouldn't ever want to lose their license. So,
and do they come visit your gardens?
Yes, absolutely.
Will they come here?
I would love them to. Please, Hendrik.
Don't tell them not to collect any seeds here anymore. By the way, also people that are interested in our garden, don't take little sucklings. Because I've noticed that people sometimes talk about, ik neem een stukje mee. Please don't do it, because that'll harm our garden, which is still very young. And no, it should not be done. Enjoy it with your eyes and not with your green fingers yet. So then of all the pictures that you sent of plants, I put a few together on a page for you to just look at and talk about.
Oh yes. Okay. So actually, that new genus that I mentioned in Chelsea Flower Show is over there. It's they were plant hunting in Vietnam with a guide called Uk, who's a very nice man, who's actually the man who I was invited to go with recently. But they found this and they didn't know what it was. It's really beautiful, and unfortunately you can't quite see it, but on the leaf on the left with the very red petiole, the underside of the leaf is actually pink, very powdery pink. But it's they named it Eucadendron mortonii, and it took them 12 years to work out how to classify it, because, as I say, it's a completely new genus in itself. But I think it's rather remarkable. So I'm sure we'll see it more widely used in the gardens.
It's in our garden?
It is in your garden.
Yeah. These are all pictures taken in our garden?
That's a picture taken in the garden. That was taken on the nursery when we were finding a plant. This one here is a Sorbus commissiana. They didn't collect it. Some friends of theirs collected it, and they reclassified it because they thought it was a different Sorbus to what it actually is. But what we've done in this bed, and I'll show you, it's the entrance to the garden, is included, I think you have 3 different Sorbuses, and so they're all from the wild, and it's rather nice to see them growing together. This is a ginger. I'm not sure which one, but we've got a collection of 4 gingers that have been found mainly in Asia, some in Guatemala, and at the top is a phytolacca. I think it's a japonica, it looks like. So collected in Japan.
And when you put the plants in, do you look at the, like gardeners love to make compositions with the various types of leaves? Is that a big drive of yours?
Yeah, I'm definitely more interested in leaf texture and shape than I am in flowers. So actually, this is the most flowery garden I've ever made, and that's because I want to work with back garden. But it's been really good fun. I mean, looking at how blue that Sorbus leaf is, for instance, and then putting it next to another Sorbus leaf, which I know goes very orange, very early on in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's quite an interesting comparison. Yeah.
So you're almost like a painter.
Yeah.
At
volume, you know. Yeah.
That one's amazing, I find that one. Right.
This is a Rubus lineatus from Vietnam. It's a raspberry family. It's got these huge long leaves, and they come out as silver and hairy. They're beautiful. That's a ginger, which grows to up to 2 meters tall and found in West Bengal. It's really wonderful. And we've put that with an orange ginger and I think a red ginger, or pinky red, I'm not sure. That is an indigo plant, Indigofera. There are 2. We've done one as a wild collection. That's not actually wild. It's found here in Holland.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing we did. We put a lot of Dutch cultivated plants alongside wild seed collected plants to try and be able to have a look at the differences. Wow, I remember that day, that week.
That week was unbelievable. You and Federica, people doing the material for the pond, the cleaning stuff. The brick on the street was still being done, and you were making this path. Maybe you can tell a little bit about your ideas about that interaction. We spoke about it early on, and that, of course, you showed yourself in front of that very early piece in the Chelsea Flower Show. It's very much about how do people work with the garden that you've created.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, this idea that the back of the garden could be an intimate space where the front would be more for people walking past with dogs or in groups, but this could be a much more private space, a path along the back. And the idea is that these trees eventually, and there's a wonderful tree there, which I saw growing in the wild in Yakushima, a tiny volcanic island in Japan, but it's a Calopanax septemlobus, and I've actually just sourced one in Holland, which we'll plant, and it's a cultivated one, so it would be very interesting to compare them when they grow. But we really wanted to make this into almost like a tunnel eventually at the back, that it's private and eventually.
And that's the hard part of planting a garden, that you do it and it will grow.
Yes.
It will be maintained, but it will become something which will be different every year.
Yeah. And that always worries me because I'm not sure who sees what I'm seeing and whether someone just thinks, oh God, you've hardly planted anything, or how can that little tiny thing ever compete with what you're saying a vision for it is. But I suppose there's a lot of trust in the garden designer.
When do you think the garden will be reaching maturity?
Well, I usually say after 4 years it's settled. You know, I think a garden's all about things knitting together and joining and growing as they should do in relation to the sun. They're leaning in the right direction, you know. So yeah, 4 years, 4 growing seasons, and it'll be looking good. And then after about 7 years, I think it'll look fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you haven't quite finished yet, have you? I mean, as you go through a few pictures of the development. This is Federica, despairing what to pick up next. Shall I get the guide? Shall I get the guide or the plan?
No, those photos, Hendrik.
She's Italian, so I can say that.
Okay.
And this again, I think this might have been 11 or 12 September, 4 days before the opening.
Yes, I think it was.
And there was no water in the pond yet, and not all the plants are in.
Yeah.
And this is getting
This
there.
is getting there, yeah.
And it looks like this part here has been sitting there already for like a year or so. So it was just in for a week, which was pretty amazing, I found. And we have to see how it all comes back this spring. We had a rather harsh March and April.
Very harsh, yes.
And there's still part at the very back that needs to be planted, which is also partly why Sophie and Federica are here, because they will start working tomorrow again on finishing up the garden now that the season has its proper situation again.
Okay.
And then, of course, this damn sculpture shows up.
Well, actually, that's the reason the pond has not yet been filled, so it's not.
Right. And your project is amazing. It's amazing that this integrates so incredibly well with the sculpture that you haven't seen, like I haven't seen it, just as a model, as an idea. And here it is. And it's being put in by a crane. You can see that the pedestal is still open. You can still see also how simple that pedestal, the sokkel, really is. It's not very big. Thinking that the sculpture weighs 6,5 tons. 6.500 kilo. Staat dus op dat stukje staal, wat heel speciaal is. En staat maar 5 centimeter vast in een speciaal daarvoor, I'll do this in Dutch, it's easier. Speciaal daarvoor in een speciale machinefabriek gemaakte stalen balk die dat beeld als het ware vast heeft. En daaronder zit een enorme fundering waarop het beeld verankerd wordt nu. Je ziet, het hangt hier nog aan de kraan. Daar zie je nog een gat aan de hoek. Daar gaat straks de bouten doorheen en daar zit het mee vast. En op dit moment moest Anish nog met Sophie beslissen hoe maken we die sokkel nou af, want ik wil het toch echt in het echt zien. So this is about the moment that Anish shows up, and together with you admires the moment when the protective foil is taken off. You're happy, he looks worried. You're holding by the neck.
The weather at this point
well under control.
The weather at this point changed. It was absolutely freezing and blowing gales.
It was. The sculpture was also dangerously moving, but you can see that immediately we had such a lucky day for the placing that there was this immediate reward, that idea of the reflecting of the sky, the bringing down of heaven to earth in a way, as Anish poetically called it, really works, even with all the rubble around it. And then again, back to work.
Yeah.
There it sits, and it has to be finished. Now this part here to the right is still not completely finished, but this is the 13th or 14th of September.
Yes.
Thursday. The Queen, the former Queen, shows up on Saturday.
Yeah.
We have to put tents out for the opening.
And as you can see, all the plants are blowing over every 5 seconds.
In Kees Remmers en Bert van Helvoort, true Brabanders, were walking around. Pont, goed. which of course for me and for
Does
Sophie.
that mean totally chilled and calm? In control?
Yeah, totally chill. No problem. It'll be all right.
If I'd been in any other country, I would not have believed it was possible to finish, but everyone kept telling me, don't worry, it will be finished. I said, I've got to go home because I don't have anything to wear. I've been wearing a boiler suit for days. I've got to go and then come back. They said, don't worry, when you come back, it'll all be tidy. It was.
So, here we are. I think also Thursday, Friday, and maybe it was Friday. And the pond wasn't filled yet, maybe it's Thursday. And you and Anish were still bickering aan het bekvechten about how, and I was sort of involved as well, but I tried to stay away, and how the sokkel, the pedestal, had to be finished. Should it be also brick, like the rest of the pond, which you like?
Yeah.
Or should it be steel like the rest of that pedestal, which it eventually was? And all of us walking around with FaceTime, with this Skyping to show it to Anish, and then work day and night really to finish it all off and fill the pond just in time. It was not completely filled even, but you were relaxed and happy and went on, and there it was, finished. And we actually later on raised the level of the water, so the pedestal is just keeping out of the water. But this is it. And immediately people start interacting, and it works. How did you feel?
Do you know, when I went down the Horn, the cut for the first time, I thought, God, this is like being in a boat. It's great, being in a pond. No, I was thrilled that it was finished.
And was it what you had envisioned?
Yes, I love the way the sculpture interacts with the water, and that the pond is surrounded by all this vegetation. And probably because only I can see what the planting will eventually look like, I feel really happy with it.
Well, I was truly amazed by the fact that it looked like it had been there for longer than those 2 weeks that it was actually finished, done, made. I found that amazing, and I found that vision of yours worked out with all these wonderful people that helped me realize this. Amazing, and the best part is seeing moments like this. You know?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting is that obviously receiving photographs as they come in through this winter, all of them have people sitting, engaging in it in some way, and that's exactly what we'd hoped for. So to really change the use of the space in front of the museum.
It absolutely has, and this is what the museum wants to be about, you know, inclusion rather than exclusiveness.
And it's almost like a museum of plants as well. You know, there's no repetition. It's really diverse.
Well, that's a problem, the museum of plants, because we in the museum tend to have explanations everywhere. This is that. You can look at it this way. More information can be found there. How are we going to go here? Because a lot of people, probably those here as well, wonder, what's the name of that? We're not a botanical garden, so we're not going to put in little things everywhere. What's the easiest way of making everybody happy?
I think we need to find an interactive way to do something online which could be referred to. Probably square the plan of the garden and say which plants are in each square. But another way of doing it is possibly a QR code that could hang on a plant, and then you scan it with your mobile phone and it'll come up with a web page telling you all about that plant.
Then you meet little plants that there's a way to hang over, put the QR code around their neck. It's not nice.
That might be difficult. But we do have to find a way, I think. We will.
So tonight we cannot answer all those questions, but it will come.
They will come, definitely. And if anyone has any ideas, then we'd love to know. Bert does.
There is an app that you can scan the plant or take a photo of the plant, and then it looks into the database what is the name.
It's like WhatsApp, but then not WhatsApp, Shazam.
Like Shazam plants.
The only problem is that you have species that are not in the database.
What's the name?
But even if we
I have to look at it because I don't know, but it's like plant scan or something like that.
Plant scan. Okay. Well, we'll keep it. Maybe we'll put it online once we're there.
Anyway. One more idea, Hendrik?
There's also a possibility to install something on the edge of the roof, which will make it possible to scan your position in the garden. That can be linked to an app that will tell you where to plant.
That's very nice. Whoa, that's cool. You can install something on the roof that just locates you in the garden, and then it'll reference you according to the plant plan of where plants are. That'd be amazing.
Oh, technique.
We'll have to come next year and do it.
Anyway, we had another critical visitor at the opening. I mentioned that before. Princess Beatrix, she's a big fan of Anish's work, and she has been here to all his presentations, very often after dark, so to speak, that nobody was here.
Yeah.
But because she really appreciated the fact that this happened, she came and honored us with her presence at the opening of our anniversary show. And the two of you led her around, and even her husband was proud and didn't trust our photographers, so he made his own pictures. And, it's too bad that Beatrix doesn't show around, but then you get her hat. So, but this was a wonderful day, remember? I mean, we were all so happy and so tired, but it was perfect. And this is the result. This is how we look at it with our security camera once in a while, to see if people behave. And it's like it's always been here. And let's try to keep it always here. And for that reason, it had to be developed and designed properly. And it has been designed properly because we had quite a big storm.
Did you?
This fall, where your trees all held up really well. And this piece. And if you look at the top, you can see that little balcony there. It's really going back and forth a meter, like that. So, and it sits. This here is only 5 centimeters in that thing. Now, that's true good design. And you know what? It was made in Holland. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anish has most of his big steel sculptures made in Groningen. And of course the polishing is very special stuff that needs to be done elsewhere. But it's also a bit of Dutch pride connected to Indian, UK pride, and then with your wonderful contribution as a supportive character, as an incredible inspirational person. Young as you may be, you are really, and the nice thing is that you like to share it, and you're generous in that respect, and that's how the garden is. It's a generous garden. It's unlike any garden that most people have ever seen. Some people have to get used to it because they've never seen something with brick and plants, let alone a sculpture like that. And this is what all new things are about. You have to get used to them, and all of a sudden you cannot live without them. And I think you did a wonderful job, and I want to thank you, Federica, Anish, of course, who cannot be here, the people that worked on it, Bert van Helvoort and his team, Kees Wellers and his team, and the one that will be taking care of it together with van Helvoort, Kazumi Makino, who was the quiet, silent inspirer in the back garden.
I can't wait for Kazumi to start gardening it and doing his magic.
So we've almost reached an hour. Are there any questions before we retire? Who wants to ask one? It's all.
I was wondering, you were saying that in the Chelsea flag show you had a flower at the back, sort of hidden as a surprise. Is there anything here in the garden that is a surprise that we might not see now, but in a couple of years?
There's a very valuable plant that's very little, and I hid it. I'm not going to tell anyone where it is, so the roots are too big to dig up. I thought I might have, exactly. I thought I might tell everyone when it's a bit bigger.
Yeah, and well rooted.
Yeah, exactly.
More questions?
There'll be lots of surprises. Also, there are so many young plants that won't flower for maybe another 4 years, and they won't make a big enough stem to be noticeable, so they'll sort of suddenly pop up with the canopy.
You started with a green museum wall, ivy-clad wall. How did that affect your
design,
art and your ideas?
Well, I think I was interested in this garden being very much like a volume of plants that you enter. So, like I was saying, it's sort of the opposite of a lawn, or it's the opposite of the brick surface that it once was. Hopefully that you go into this back space, but you really engage in it. You're sort of immersed in the garden space, and I'm hoping it'll become enclosed and, as I say, quite private. But yeah, it's definitely to do with making a volume of plants and not just thinking about plants as being something down here. but something all over you, all around you. And like entering the secret garden, you know, that wonderful Frances Hodgson Burnett book, you know, really your whole life was taken over by it, but something magic can happen in the garden, so I hope that happens here.
Als u even gaat staan, kunnen we het misschien niet allemaal horen. Ja, het is heel makkelijk hoor, gewoon opstaan.
I will talk a little bit louder.
Okay.
I have a question because I was thinking and I was very interested about the reflectiveness of the water and also the reflectiveness of the sculpture and how you said that these Japanese gardens could be a place of reflection actually. And when you said this about this volume, creating this volume of plants, I was actually wondering what role do these plants have in the Japanese garden, but also in your garden, because has it to do with the fact that they can include you, that you can also be in a private space, but also be kind of in a public space? Because this sculpture, as well as this water, is really depending on what it is reflecting to gain. You know, water, for example, is very much depending on the context.
Yeah.
And the sculptures as well. So, and these plants kind of form some kind of environment. So that's why I was thinking about this. Maybe you can tell a little bit more.
Yes. I mean, a lot of Anish's work has been about an object and a non-object equivalent of it. So the thing that's both present and absent at the same time. And these the stainless steel body of sculptures is definitely both present and absent. At one level, this is a huge, great chunk of steel, but at another level, really, it fleets, it changes. It's not one thing at any one time. So I think the water body reflects that. And that very early garden that Hendrik showed us, he said it was a very important starting point. It's actually a 6th century garden from Japan. And it was designed as a paradise garden, as a sort of place, no place. It's the location of paradise, but of course it's the location of the mystical paradise that's not actually present on Earth. So again, it's this sort of effervescent, fleeting thing. And plants are almost the opposite. The jungle is so fully present where you are. I mean, this jungle actually, is the Amazon, was the reason I started studying horticulture in the first place, that you can't avoid being where you actually are, that the plants are so physically present, they demand your attention and your engagement. So I think there are these two parts of the garden that are, I hope, coming together to give these very different experiences.
Does that answer your question?
I think yes.
Okay. Any other? I have a microphone now, so maybe that's easier and everybody can hear the question.
Do you follow your gardens? Because it changes all year round and also every year. I mean, you say in 7 years it's fully developed. How do you do that? How do you follow? Do you come back?
Yes, I'd love to come back, yes. I mean, this is one of the difficulties as a garden designer, because it's not just something ready to be given over. You have to do two things. You have to watch it yourself, but you also have to know that you can trust in a gardener. So one of the reasons I was able to trust in using the amount of plants that I've used and the rare plants that I've used is because Kazumi is here at the Pont. That wouldn't have been possible in many places. So there's got to be a long engagement with the commissioner and the garden designer. I would certainly come back and see how things are doing. Also, there are really fundamental decisions. Do you want a plant to be, growing as a shrub, or do you want to turn it into a tree? Or there are big things that you have to decide. And between you have to understand what the vision for the project is. So yes, certainly, it's a long-term commitment. Yes.
Nog meer vragen?
Practical question. Lots of these plants come from different parts of the world, and might be different climate zones. Did you use special soil, or did you did you take care of Dutch climate, for instance?
Yes, so Sue and Glenn Wynne-Jones, I've taken most of the rare plants come from their collections. They're either collected directly by them or people they have worked with in America or elsewhere in the UK mainly, sometimes in Japan. But their nursery is at the foot of Mount Snowdon in Wales. So anything they collect has to be able to grow in the foot of Mount Snowdon in Wales. So you're really looking at the temperate band across the world. You've got a lot in China, Vietnam, you know, and Japan of course, but going right through, and then in the Americas you're going basically through Guatemala kind of area. But yeah, I mean, absolutely making sure that what we choose should be able to, and of course you can't quite tell, but should be able to grow in the conditions that you have here in Holland. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Anybody else? Otherwise we're going to call it closed. No more? Okay, well thank you very much, Sophie. I can now tell you that Sophie is also working on another very important project at the moment, something that also involves nature, but in a very different way. And it also has a design of your own in Anish. We're all very curious, and especially because that also must influence your life a little bit. I appreciate it all the more that you make the negotiating trip to the Netherlands again. Now, they have to guess what I just said.
It took me a while to guess.
It took a while to guess, yes. So, you'll be back more. Maybe over the years we can do another talk or go out in the garden and look at it. For now, if you would like a drink or a cup of coffee, then you can go to our cafeteria. Like I said, we're open until 8 o'clock, then it's really end time. And thank you all for coming. As you know, ik zal het nu even in het Nederlands zeggen, wij doen op elke donderdagavond niet van dit soort uitgebreide dingen, maar er is altijd happy hour at the Pont. Dus, dat kan drank zijn, maar dat is vooral met anderen kijken naar kunst, en ook bieden we dan speciale momenten aan waarbij dat dan door ons ook wordt begeleid. Dus u bent van harte welkom. Het museum is op donderdagavond ook gratis open. En op andere tijden, als u wilt betalen, bent u natuurlijk ook van harte welkom. Want zoals u weet, wij werken zonder subsidie. We zijn een museum met een eigen vermogen dat het rendement oplevert op basis waarvan we dit altijd moois kunnen doen. Maar het is natuurlijk best handig als af en toe ook een bezoeker een kleine bijdrage levert. En dus als u dat zo nu dan wilt doen met uw museumkaart of zonder uw museumkaart, dan stellen wij dat zeer op prijs. Dank voor uw komst. Nog veel plezier aan de tuin en met de tuin en in de tuin van Sophie Walker. En blijf googlen. Je kunt op Google heel goed een Google alert zetten voor bijvoorbeeld Sophie Walker. Dan krijg je ook nog andere Sophie Walkers en there's also apologies.
I don't know what this means.
That's a different one. But you can Google een Google alert voor Kapoor en Sophie Walker if you make the children. Dan blijft u gewoon altijd in uw inbox op de hoogte van alle spannende dingen die er gebeuren. En misschien krijgt u zelfs een geboortekaart. Wie weet.